What is going on, squad? How we doing today? We got Jordan Elliott back on Friday. Finally back on track, Jordan. How are you doing today?
I'm doing all right, man. The sun is out in the Bay Area. It was a beautiful day, and the 49ers have not dictated my mood for the weekend yet, so I'm doing all right.
So you got a couple more days before the mood change occurs. But I figured today would be a good day to kind of preview 49ers versus Bengals. We can kind of dive into it. Let's start off with some of the news that we got going here while the SDS squad drops into the chat. Um, some of the news that we've got from the pressers today are, player related, availability related. The 49ers will be without running back Elijah Mitchell, cornerback Emmanuel Mosley, linebacker Dre Greenlaw, D tackle Mo Hurst, running back Trenton Cannon. Starting with who is out, what are your thoughts on the players that aren't going to make it to this must-win game against the Bengals on Sunday?
Well, my initial analysis is that it's going to be really hard for them to help contribute to this game while not being suited up. So I think that they're going to have to obviously find some way to replace Mitchell's production. Will be probably the biggest thing. I don't think it will be too difficult per se, just because I think that the scheme does so much work for the running backs. And I think the fact that the offensive line is still fully intact definitely will help whoever is back there, whether it's Wilson or Hasty or whoever it may be this week. So yeah, I'm not too worried about it. It's unfortunate, but the main one to watch really is Deebo Samuel. And if Deebo can play, it obviously gives the offense a huge boost that we saw they were lacking last week. I do know he practiced today, and by all accounts, looked like he was moving well. They could still hold him out just for a precautionary reason. Groin injuries are not something that you want to risk long-term, adverse effects with. So I could understand if they did hold him out one more week, but it is encouraging that he was able to go for one day of practice, because a lot of times if you're not able to get in any practice during the week, it's almost definitive that you'll be held out if you're in that kind of range that he's in now. So Deebo's the biggest one. If he plays, I honestly think that might be the difference between them winning or losing this game. I think they're more than capable of winning if he doesn't play, but I do think that that's the most important variable that we haven't really gotten a definitive answer on yet.
Absolutely. And by all accounts, it sounds like they're going to really try to make this happen where Deebo Samuel is going to play. I think we had a similar situation last week with Fred Warner. Sounds like Fred Warner was really trying to make his case for playing against Seattle. And it sounds like they opted for long term rather than the short term payout. So we saw them do that with Fred Warner last week. It could be a situation with Deebo Samuel, but I think it's safe to say that with Deebo Samuel this year, he's been kind of like the offense at this point, right? So if the 49ers really want to get things moving, especially on the offensive side, they kind of need Deebo, right?
And it's just he's so pivotal to what they do. And I don't want to just state the obvious by saying that, but it's the ability to get him the ball in space. It's the ability to utilize him out of the backfield. It's the fact that defenses have to respect him whenever he's motioning across a formation. And George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk are really good players too. Obviously, Mitchell's had a good year. Sherfield's made some big catches for them, but nobody has played at that level that Deebo has. And just the absolute tenacity he plays with when he has the ball in his hand is something that I don't think there's another receiver in the league that you can really compare him to, or that could be compared to him in regards to just how tough he is to bring down in the open field. So I really think that it's, again, there is a path to winning this game without him, but I felt much more encouraged today hearing that he practiced in full and looked like he was moving better, because if he was coming in listed as doubtful, with the uphill battle the defense is going to have with a depleted secondary, they need a playmaker of Deebo's caliber to be able to come in and maybe be that game-changing guy. Like, think back to that Chicago game when nothing was working, and then they throw a little screen pass behind the line of scrimmage on 2nd and 20 or whatever it was, and Deebo takes it 80 yards to the 2-yard. They need a guy that can really be a game breaker, and I think George Kittle's capable of doing that. Ayuk's proven he's capable of doing that, but Deebo has done it consistently and at a level that's on par with some of the best playmakers in the entire league. And I just think that that's something that Again, I don't want to state the obvious here, but you can't have enough of those guys going for you on a given week. So I really hope he ends up playing.
Absolutely. And if the quest for 6 continues, just like Ego shouted us out in the chat, appreciate you, Ego, for the contribution. If if the 49ers want any chance of getting that 6th this year, a lot of that's going to come with contributions from Debo Samuel. I know right now we're not focused on that. We're focused on the Bengals. We're focused one game at a time. Being able to see what this team can contribute towards the win against the Bengals. But I think the biggest thing potentially, obviously, getting Debo Samuel back will be a huge lift. But Elijah Mitchell being down, um, I believe we had Darius ask, how do we feel about Brian Hill? I wanted to get your thoughts. What are your thoughts on Brian Hill, the addition? Because going into this game at the running back position, we're still thin. Jermichael Hasty is seemingly the only healthy running back that has been on the roster. Obviously, the 49ers add Brian Hill, who's been a journeyman up until this point. Uh, Jeff Wilson dealing with some knee issues. We're not really positive what his availability is going to be like. Um, so, what do you think? Do you think we see Brian Hill contribute anything to this game, or what are you kind of seeing from the running back position, knowing that we're limping in without Elijah Mitchell, who's been our workhorse up until this point?
I mean, they could. I mean, there's very few positions where you can just feel confident plugging in a guy that's only been on the team for about a week and hasn't really
Hmm.
had time to get the full install and stuff. But running back would be one where I wouldn't feel too bad about it. We saw obviously last week Seattle signed Adrian Peterson in the middle of the week and he scored a touchdown against the 49ers.
Hmm.
So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see him. He does run with a little bit more physicality than Jermichael Hasty. Well, I believe Hasty's back to pretty much normal now, right? Because all the practice reports I've been getting was he was practicing in full. So um, I imagine that it will be some sort of 1-2 punch with him, and maybe Jeff Wilson still gets some carries. I don't know. They might be more cautious with his knee. Brian Hill's kind of just been like a journeyman kind of guy. His best season was last year, where he ran the ball 100 times for 465 yards. So is he going to come in and run for 150? Like, no. But if he's able to read his blocks and feel out the zone blocking and consistently allow them to pick up 3-4 yards here, 5 yards there. I don't see why he can't do it. And again, it's no disrespect to any of the running backs for the work they put in, but this scheme is so it does so much of the heavy lifting for whoever is carrying the rock that I just think that you would have to have a real low, you'd have to basically go out there and be like Trent Richardson when he was on the Colts to be bad in this offense running the ball, where you're just literally not seeing holes and you're running into the wrong gap. And I haven't seen anything from Brian Hill that would make me believe that he's so incompetent that he can't, come in and be at least an adequate fill-in the meantime while Mitchell gets healthy.
Yeah, and I've had my eyes on Brian Hill since Wyoming. He's someone that I scouted, someone I've always kept my eye on as kind of one of those fringe guys. Maybe he makes the leap, maybe he doesn't. He hasn't really made the leap. He never really stuck around. He was able to produce here, there, in spots, like you said. Probably the best year he had was last year, but still finds himself without a team this year. So it's going to be interesting to see what he can provide. For me, he kind of reminds me of Jeff Wilson in a sense, not a burner, not going to beat you with speed, but has enough wiggle to make you miss, and has enough power too. So we'll see. I don't really anticipate Brian Hill. I'm not expecting a huge Brian Hill game, because we still have running somewhat healthy running backs that have been here. So that's probably where we go. But transitioning and staying on the kind of conversation of injuries, the 49ers have a little something going on with Dante Johnson, who's officially questionable. Um, Kyle Shanahan said today that he would start if available. He's having some kind of personal there's personal reasons behind it. They didn't go into detail, but essentially saying that and he's not traveling with the team. So if Dante Johnson does make it to Cincinnati and he does have the opportunity to start, what do you think of that? And or if he doesn't make it, Kyle Shanahan said it's either Ambry Thomas or Diamador Lenore. starting across from Josh Norman. How are you feeling about the cornerbacks going into this game with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd, who's probably one of the most underrated wide receivers in this league, heading into this matchup?
Well, I would first of all feel a lot better if Dante Johnson is able to play. But anytime you're dealing with personal stuff off the field, whether it's family, whatever it is, that always comes before football. So I respect whatever decision Dante Johnson makes, and whatever he has going on in his personal life is far more important than this football game. But if he is able to get there, I would feel much better, because as much as people dump on Dante Johnson and they've turned him into this like meme because he gets cut and re-signed by the team every year. He's what you really can, like, all you can really ask for in terms of having a fourth, fifth depth piece at corner that's not brought in on any team to start. He's not coming in winning jobs out of camp. He's a guy who's a depth piece who's adequately been able to fill in, and I do think that he's played well. I just think that, again, it comes back to like this narrative that gets the perception gets clouded because of this narrative that Dante Johnson just sucks because he gets cut and re-signed all the time. Like, he's a depth guy. Like, that's kind of like, it's unfair to expect a depth guy to come in and play at the level that Mosley or Verrett or some of these guys, that we've grown accustomed to playing at. If it comes down to Thomas or Lenore, I mean, like, Lenore's had a problem where he's getting, kind of getting caught kind of flat-footed and getting beat over the top. It's happened a few times. I think that he, was a bit rusty. So I understand the Seattle game. It's really hard when you're not getting first team reps and you're not getting live action for weeks, and you're just kind of thrown out there against DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, who are two of the better receivers in the league. I would feel more comfortable, just based on what I've seen, I would feel more comfortable with Lenore than Thomas. Kyle said a few times that Thomas has made great strides since I saw him at training camp, and I believe D'Amico Ryans has said the same. So it's fully within the realm of possibility that he doesn't look anything like the way he looked when Brad and I saw him at training camp. But when we did see him at training camp, I was not encouraged by what I did see. And again, he's another guy where he took last year off in college because of COVID. He sat out his final year of college. So maybe he's just rusty and he needed some time to get back into shape. And as much as you like to believe that these guys are working in the offseason, and I don't doubt that they are, that offseason work can't really replicate game reps and practice reps. So maybe he just needed some time to kind of get back into the flow of things. I do think that Thomas is a little bit more suited to play man coverage, just based on what I saw from both of their college tapes. But I believe between the injuries that they have in the secondary and the fact Josh Norman's playing, I would expect them to run a little bit more zone. So maybe they do feel more comfortable with Lenore. But just based on what they've been saying, I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Thomas, because we have seen a healthy amount of Lenore this year. And if they really believe what they're saying to the media and during press conferences about how Thomas has taken strides, maybe they do really believe he is ready. I just would say, based on what I've seen, don't be surprised if this guy gets, beat a couple times, just because that's what I have grown accustomed to seeing. But again, this is months prior, and I obviously haven't had the access to see them in practice every day. I don't know what kind of work he's been putting in the film room and what kind of stuff he's been doing behind the scenes. So my answer would just be like, in order, I would rather it be Johnson, Lenore, Thomas, which means it's probably going to end up being Ambry Thomas. And it's just kind of buckle in. It's probably going to be a roller coaster ride. He might have some really big pass breakups, but he also might have some plays where he's getting torched. I just hope they scheme around it and they have a lot of cover two shells and a lot of safety help over the top, because those Cincinnati receivers are no joke.
That's a perfect transition into my next question, because I know we're focusing on personnel at this point, but obviously playing football is a team game. What are some of the ways these coaches can try, and just to elaborate a little bit more on what you just said, because we're looking at the screen right now. Jamar Chase, as a rookie, is being able to produce and is almost there to cracking 1,000 reception yards on the season with Joe Burrow. But obviously, you have T. Higgins, you have Tyler Boyd, like we previously mentioned, but you also have Uzama. You've got Joe Mixon. Sounds like he's questionable, but it sounds like he should be available with it's being called an illness. So, what are some scheme things? How does the 49ers defense, with the injuries at cornerback, how do they stop these guys? What are some things they could do scheme wise to kind of make it muddy or just get them out of sorts?
I think that they need to kind of do what teams have been doing to Kansas City. And basically, what teams have done to Kansas City this year is that they have sacrificed a bit of, I don't want to say creativity, but they've sacrificed a bit of creativity, I guess, for lack of a better word, and flexibility, I guess, would be better, by bringing guys into the box, by having a single high safety, and they basically just sat two safeties deep, and they've basically done whatever they can to take away the deep explosive plays. And what that's done is it's forced Kansas City to have to repeatedly take the check down. It's forced them to have to repeatedly dink and dunk, which is not the way that they want to play. If you look at the Bengals offense, they're 14th in yards, but they're 7th in points scored, which means to me that they rely a little bit more heavily on the explosive play. They're also 20th in the league in net yards per drive. So to me, what that means is that when they're hitting these big explosive plays, they're turning into touchdowns and field goals. They're getting in the red zone, which we're also getting to. They have a really good red zone offense as well, but they're not doing it consistently drive to drive. So I would force them to try to be a little bit more patient. I would make sure that Jimmy Ward or Jaquaski Tart is shaded over whatever corner has Jamar Chase. Because I don't know, Higgins, I know he has like a foot injury or something going on. I don't think he's been ruled out yet, as far as
He
I
is
know.
questionable with an ankle as of
Yeah,
today.
so he might go, he might not, but Boyd and Chase are more than serviceable. But I would make sure that I have extra attention diverted towards making sure that there's safety help over the top of whoever has Jamar Chase. Because if he's left one-on-one, he and Burrow just have this great rapport downfield. Because Burrow doesn't have a great arm by any stretch, but he does throw a nice deep ball, and it's amplified when it goes to Chase. The chemistry those two have is really well. It's something that they've had going back to their days at LSU. So I just think that they need to do whatever they can to limit that. And they need to make sure that somebody else beats them. And truthfully, I don't think they'll have an issue with that. My concern is more actually with Joe Mixon and the run game, because the 49ers secondary, like, I understand everybody has this perception of them because they commit a lot of these defensive pass interference penalties, and they have a lot of, bad reps in big spots that tend to be like burned into people's memories. But they're a top 4 passing offense if you base it on yardage. They're top 10 in net yards allowed per pass attempt. Like, they've been much better than they've gotten credit for. And even with the injuries at the corner position, I think as long as you have Tart and Ward back there, I feel pretty comfortable that they can scheme around the deficiencies that might exist with having depth players playing, starting, at corner. But the run defense is where the 49ers have really been hurt. They're 18th in rushing yards allowed. They have shown a propensity to be susceptible to runs, especially up the middle when they get into that wide 9. So I think if they're able to take away the deep ball and then still find a way to limit Joe Mixon, I really like their chances, because I don't think Cincinnati is built to consistently over the course of 60 minutes have to keep dinking and dunking and finding their way, I don't want to say being patient, because I think that that's not fair to them, but I think that that's not how they want to play. And if the 49ers can make them uncomfortable, it bodes very well for them. So by eliminating the explosive plays, I think that will help them greatly.
Are you so to kind of keep on that same topic, obviously the 49ers are getting Fred Warner back. It seems like it's with Greenlaw out, it's going to be the Fred Warner and Azeez Al-Shaair show. Do you think having those two back will help aid Joe Mixon, or at least stopping Joe Mixon? Or do you think that we're really going to have to get some more production out of guys like DJ Jones, Givens, and those types of guys that are in the middle of that defensive line?
If DJ Jones plays the way that he played against Seattle last Sunday, you could put Barry Sanders, Jim Brown, LaDainian Tomlinson back there, and I would honestly feel great about it. He played so well last week, and he's been playing at such a high level all season that I believe that they really, I don't say they're, dependent on him just playing like a superstar, stuffing the run every week to have a chance. But if he plays the way he did last week, there isn't really a rushing attack or running back in the league that I would be afraid of. And I think he's more than capable of doing that. I think that Armstead and Bosa have also been pretty good against the run in recent weeks. They've gotten a lot better. So yeah, I'm not too worried about it. I just think that it is an area of weakness, and it's quietly an area of strength for the Bengals, because we do get so caught up in, the receiving group and Joe Burrow and all these, explosive plays downfield. But Joe Mixon's quietly had a really good year. And I know we're discussing, real football, but I've been a big fan of Joe Mixon. I draft him in fantasy like every year. And it's anybody else who does knows it's such a roller coaster ride, because the dude will have a week where he goes off for a bunch of points and the next week he's non-existent. And I think that this year, and it's ironically the year where I was like, I'm done, I'm not doing it anymore. This year he has had much more. Yeah, he's had much more consistency week to week. So I think that they've done a much better job of consistently getting him the ball. The offensive line has been a little bit better in the run game, I believe. So while their rushing attack isn't, elite by any stretch, they're 17th in yards and they're 22nd in yards per attempt. But I do think that Joe Mixon has the ability to go off at any point in time. So I would be more concerned with that, simply just because I like the matchup for the 49ers. It's not necessarily that it's so much like the Bengals' strength is clearly the passing game, but the 49ers' biggest weakness is that run defense if we're breaking down the defense as a whole. So I just think that it's a situation where they can kind of get, I don't want to say caught off guard, because they're more than aware of what Joe Mixon can do, but I do think it's a situation where you don't want to oversell too much on stopping this passing attack and leave you vulnerable to these big runs, because Mixon's more than capable of taking over a game on the ground.
Right. And I think essentially kind of what you're saying is this offense is very well balanced, and you can't really like cut off your nose, or whatever the saying is. Like, you got to be able to take advantage of trying to stop both phases of the offense, passing and running, because they can get it done on the ground, as you just kind of indicated with Joe Mixon. Pretty decent offensive line. You got Riley Reef as a right tackle. You got Jonah Williams on the left tackle. Do you think Bosa gets a multiple sack game this week, or how do you kind of see Bosa's continued rise? Do you think he can do it by himself, or is he going to need some help out there on those edges?
Bosa's just a generational talent, so I want to give him his recognition that he deserves, because he's just a phenomenal player. But I think it gets so overblown that people act like he's out there just doing it by himself again. I thought DJ Jones was the best player in the defensive line last week, including Bosa. Armstead had a few really big reps. He had a sack, obviously. He had a few pressures as well. I think the biggest thing, and Charles Omenihu has been really good too. He's quietly been a very good pickup for what the 49ers gave up to acquire him. I think he ends up making the team next year too. He's a guy that I think will definitely be around for a little bit. I think the biggest issue really is just they're missing D Ford. D Ford is really good when he plays. When D Ford is opposite Nick Bosa, that defensive line is almost impossible to block. It's an offensive line's worst nightmare. And unfortunately, the drop off from D Ford to Samson Ebukam is massive. And I think that as much as it's, it can be frustrating that maybe Ebukam hasn't played as well as I think he's capable of playing, I do also understand that he's basically transitioning and playing an entirely new position. He was a stand-up outside linebacker for the Rams in a 3-4 scheme, and they're now asking him to be, hand in the ground 4-3 DN for the 49ers in a totally different scheme. So I think that there definitely has been an adjustment. And I think that the 49ers just kind of banked on his athleticism, because he's a freak athlete. Like, if you look at Ebukam,
he's
really
very strong too.
Yeah, tremendous athlete, but there's so much more to it. And when you're so used to playing standing up, rushing the outside as a 3-4 backer, and then they just put you in a 4-3 scheme, like, I don't think it's fair to assume that the 49ers maybe just assumed that his athleticism would translate like that. So I do think that kind of amplifies it. And he hasn't been terrible, but he also hasn't been I think what a lot of people expected based on that athleticism. So to answer your question, no, I don't think Bosa will have to do it alone. I think that the defensive line has actually played really well in recent weeks, but I do think that Bosa is just so talented and so good, and the drop off from him to the next edge player on the team, because they've essentially been giving Armstead reps inside. He and DJ Jones have done a really good job rushing the interior, but the drop off from him to an Ebukam, to an Omenihu, to a Jordan Willis, players who I really like, they're just not in the same universe as Nick Bosa. And I think that really magnifies it, because when D Ford is on, as good as Nick Bosa is, D Ford is in that discussion as well. And I just think that they've missed that. Like, we got a taste of what it was like to see those two together, and everything else after it. It's like getting handed a 5-star meal and then being forced to eat microwave dinners. Like, there's nothing wrong with microwave dinners. They get the job done sometimes. But when you've had that 5-star dining, it's really hard because that's what you're always going to, be comparing it to. So I just think that it'll be interesting to see how they utilize him. I do like that they've kind of moved Bosa around. His rookie year, he really seemed to rush exclusively off the right side of the defensive line, which means that he was going up against the opposing team's left tackles.
Hmm.
Generally speaking, not always left tackles are going to be the better of the two tackles. You're generally going to put your better athlete and your better player at left tackle rather than right. But he did have that strip sack that he had against the Seahawks was him rushing off the left side. So he was going up against the Seahawks right tackle and Brandon Shell. So I do think the fact that they've been willing to move him around, they've actually rushed him from the interior a few times too. And with the fact that Joe Burrow isn't necessarily like, he can run for a first down. Don't get me wrong. The guy has some sneaky mobility, but he's definitely not Kyler Murray or Russell Wilson or some of these, mobile quarterbacks who've given the 49ers nightmares for years. And what the 49ers have done this year against those mobile quarterbacks is they've limited the amount of stunts that they run. But with a guy like Burrow, who's going to be more inclined to stay in the pocket and not escape, I expect to see a little bit more creativity when it comes to stunts and changing up some of the gaps that they attack. So I definitely think that this week the defensive line will, between the combination of them playing well and the fact that Burrow tends to hold the ball a little bit longer than I think he should sometimes, I think they're going to have actually a very productive week. I think they'll end up with multiple sacks this week and at the very least be pressuring him into making some throws that he's definitely not comfortable making. I don't think he's going to be sitting back there with all day to throw, which will obviously bode well for the 49ers.
Absolutely. And we're going to need that defensive line to show up and show out, especially with the weapons that the Bengals have on the outside. I mean, with Joe Burrow, again, you kind of alluded to some of his ability of and escapability, but at the same time, just keep him bottled up, keep him moving, force him to have one eye on Nick Bosa or whoever is coming from that defensive line to just kind of just get him out of sorts, right? We want to make him uncomfortable and all those kinds of things. Before we switch over to 49ers offense versus Bengals defense, are there any last points about the Bengals offense and the attempt to contain them, stop them? Like, will they stop them? Is it a containment type issue? Is this going to be like an offensive showcase where it's really going to come down to who scores the most? What do you kind of think in that regard?
I think, again, it just comes back to limiting the explosive plays. I think if they really make Cincinnati have to work for these yards and they're willing to cede, the check down and the shallow cross in place of taking away the deep post and these go routes down the sideline they like running, I think over the course of 60 minutes, it will bode well for the 49ers because I think that that's not the game that the Bengals want to play. And I also just think that it's a situation where they can't really get into a shootout. And I don't think that they are going to be overly aggressive and running a lot of these exotic blitzes and leaving their guy. Because, to be able to do that stuff, you have to have corners that you trust. And while people may not like hearing this, I think they trust Josh Norman just because he's a veteran. I think he understands what he needs to do. But between him getting beat a few times when he is left on an island with a guy and the fact that it will be Demo or Ambry Thomas if Dante Johnson can't go, I don't see them teaming up a bunch of, cover one shells where they're running a bunch of these exotic blitzes and basically having these guys play man on the outside. I think they're going to be much more reliant on playing as a cohesive unit and relying on some zone coverage and just basically saying, hey, we have a good defensive line play. These guys have been playing well in recent weeks. We're going to rush 4 and drop 7 and hope that they can get home. So I'm really interested to see that. And yeah, I don't think the 49ers can afford to get into a track meet with them just because we don't know what Debo's status is. And the Bengals have shown when they get going, they can be very tough to stop. I would add, since Burrow hurt his pinky last week, there definitely was a noticeable drop-off in the way the offense looked. They did claw back into that game with the Chargers. Right. You could argue they would have had a chance to win if not for some costly turnovers. But right. I do think that there was a very discernible difference in play once he did hurt that pinky. When your pinky on your throwing hand is bent the opposite way, like you can expect it's going to be pretty tough. These guys are tough guys that play in the NFL, but they're still human beings. Oh, yeah. Like, it's, going to affect you to a degree. So again, that's why I would try to make Burrow throw the ball 40, 45 times, make him earn those, and I don't think that that's, again, the game the Bengals want to play. I think they want to run the ball. They want to set up, big plays off of play action. They want to take shots. Zach Taylor runs a lot of the, his philosophy is very similar to Kyle Shanahan's. They come from the same coaching tree. So I think you'll see a lot of the same stuff with that aggressive outside zone and whatnot. So, yeah, I just think, again, it just comes back to it's very easy. Like if things went perfect, you could just say, oh, we'll just take away the big plays and take away the running plays and take away the short, just take away everything, hold them to 0 points. Like, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way, obviously. Otherwise, every team would do it. So you're going to have to sacrifice in some area. And that's, again, where I would come back to. I would sacrifice giving up that shallow cross, giving up those, check downs, and banking on guys like Azeez Al-Shaair and Tart and Ward, these guys who are so good at tackling in the open field, to make a play in space and do that, knowing that you're getting a little bit more fortification on the back end and doing what you can to eliminate those huge chunk plays down the field.
It feels like with the defense and Fred Warner coming back, Azeez Al-Shaair, and with kind of Talanoa moving into kind of that hybrid linebacker role, more playing inside the box. You got both the safeties in Tart and Jimmy Ward. Kind of feels like the middle of the field. I feel kind of confident with those guys' cover abilities. It's the outside corners that we just kind of hold on and hopefully get the type of movement on the offensive and defensive line that we want to help aid our cornerbacks. So it's going to be an interesting situation, to say the least, in regards to the wide receiver cornerback matchup. But it takes a team to win. So hopefully they can do certain things to kind of mitigate some of the really big breaking plays that can potentially occur when you got weapons like they do. But switching over to the defense, they have Trey Hendrickson, the high-priced free agent from the Saints. They got Sam Hubbard, DJ Reader, Larry Ogunjobi on that defensive line. Pretty decent defensive line on paper. We saw how the 49ers can put themselves in a little bit of a disadvantage when, dropping back, passing, having longer developing route concepts on the outside. What are your thoughts between the Bengals defensive line and how they match up against the 49ers offensive line? And do you think they'll be able to uh, provide enough of a pass block to be able to allow some longer developing routes um, hit, or is it going to be a lot of quick passing game? Like, what do you kind of think how those two things correlate?
I think it depends on what they can get early out of the running backs. If Jermichael Hasty plays well, doesn't turn the ball over, I think that he's more than capable of kind of carrying the load for a week. Maybe they sprinkle in some Brian Hill. I think we'll see some use check carries as well this week. But I do think that they can use that short passing game to kind of be in place of the rushing attack. That might be a little bit I don't say it might be. It's probably going to be at a disadvantage given the fact they have like 2 healthy running backs right now, and one of them's been on the team for 5 days. But I do think that they can replicate a lot of that, and especially if Debo's able to play, they are able to scheme some of this stuff up with bubble screens, this quick passing game, the stuff within 3-4 yards of the line of scrimmage. It's not the same as running the ball, but you're kind of getting the same efficiency and effectiveness where you can wear down a defense doing
That
that.
makes sense.
So I think that they will be able to do that. I do also think that the 49ers will be better. So the Bengals on paper have a very good rush defense, right? They're number 4 in yards allowed. They're number 4 in rushing attempts against, and they're number 11 in yards per attempt. So on paper, they have a good rushing attack, but and they deserve credit for that. They have a pretty good front seven. DJ Reader has been one of the better signings of the offseason. He's kind of like in the same sense that DJ Jones might not get the national recognition he deserves, but people who watch him play every week know how good he is. I'm sure Bengals fans feel the same way and how much he affects a game. But I think a lot of that also has to do with the fact that their passing defense really hasn't been great. They're 27th in passing yards allowed. So I think, how much of that really is that they're just so good against the run that teams, if they were that good of a defense, they would be much better against the pass. I think it's a lot of it is just teams have been more willing to throw the ball because they have ranked in the bottom 5 in their passing defense. So I think the 49ers need to take advantage of that. And again, it comes back to, can the 49ers take advantage of a defense that's willing to give up a little bit more in the pass game at the expense of stopping them on the ground? And we saw last week in Seattle, while they did have some big plays, consistently they weren't able to win when Seattle clearly was at a disadvantage defending through the air. While they stopped almost everything, it felt like, on the ground. They did a really good job there. the 49ers had a better passing attack last week, they probably win that game. So I think it's going to be a very similar situation where between the injuries to the running back position and between the fact that Cincinnati's been an above average run defense, they are more than capable of slowing down this rushing attack. It's really, I hate to put it this way because people, again, don't want to hear this, but it's really going to come down to, can Jimmy Garoppolo make the throws that he needs to in big spots? Cincinnati, for whatever it's worth, they're really weak over the middle when it comes to defending the pass too, and that is Jimmy's greatest strength as a quarterback, throwing the football. So it does bode well in that sense. So it does give me a little bit more faith. Admittedly, I don't go into any game feeling confident when it has to be, one on his arm, but he's capable of doing it. I just have seen it not work so many times that I'm not going to declare that, oh, they're a bottom 5 pass defense, Jimmy's going to carve them up, because I've seen how this movie plays out far too many times. But I do think that they should feel pretty good about their chances of generating consistent yardage. And again, I do think that Jimmy can get into a rhythm throwing over the middle, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if he had a really good game. I'm just not going to go into the game declaring that, the 49ers, like I wrote an article for Niners Nation a couple of days ago about how they have to take advantage of the fact that Cincinnati's pass defense is so bad. And it sounds really good in theory, but you actually have to do it. And I just think that we've seen enough inconsistencies that we don't know what Jimmy we're going to get week to week. We don't know if the receivers are going to drop balls week to week. There's just been so many glaring inconsistencies that even though it sounds really good going in and it logically makes a lot of sense, the results still have to happen. So I think that they would be better served doing that than running. Like, I don't think this is a game where they run the ball 40 times like we saw against, the Rams and Jacksonville and the Vikings. I think it's a game where they will have to be very balanced and probably throw the ball 25, 30 times and run the ball around the same amount of time.
It kind of feels like it's stacking up to a game where it's going to fall on Jimmy Garoppolo's shoulders, doesn't it? No Elijah Mitchell. We know he's been really the only running back that we can rely on. And still, even with Elijah Mitchell, he's still growing into his role and what he's capable of doing. And he's now gone. Jermichael Hasty's been hurt for a majority of the year. Again, Brian Hill, no idea. It feels like this game is tailor-made to be won or lost by Jimmy Garoppolo. And I know you just got done talking about how that doesn't really bode well from a confidence standpoint. But what are some wrinkles they can do? I know we talked about short, like if we can't run the football, we can generate short passing games and concepts to be an extension of the run game. And you've talked about going over the middle, but it just sounds like this is a game, regardless of what the scheme or whatever it says. This just really kind of feels like this is going to be a Jimmy Garoppolo game where we need him to step up. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and that's what's so frustrating is that it feels like it's going to be one of those games where he's making these throws where you're just like, how did he do that? Like, and he'll miss a guy in the flat and throw it 5 yards over their head, or he'll miss a leak play, or he'll miss, these layup throws, but he's going to be out there converting these 3rd and 8s where he's getting slammed into the ground as he lets go of the ball. He's going to be throwing back shoulder balls into the back hip pocket of Kyle Juszczyk. Like, that's the thing that gets me so much about Jimmy Garoppolo is, like, again, like I make it clear almost every time I come on here, I don't think he's very good. And I'm not shy about saying that. I don't think that that's necessarily wrong either if you objectively look at it. But he also isn't so terrible that he's just, you can label him as just, he's just awful quarterback. He has these throws every week where you're kind of just like maybe he's finally turning a corner. The thing with me is that he's in his 8th year in the league and he's clearly not ever going to turn that corner, but he does just enough to keep you like engaged. And I could definitely see this being a game where he plays well enough that he is an important factor. This isn't a game where we're having these discussions after where, oh, well, they won because of everything else but Jimmy. Like, no, I could see this easily being a game where he has his fingerprints all over the 49ers pulling out a win that they pretty much need to have. Like, it's not going to sink them if they don't get it, but this is a really important game. And again, that's what's most frustrating about this is that you never know what you're getting with this guy. I said earlier in the week, like, it's a roller coaster ride and I want off. I'm not having a fun time. I'm over it. Like, these highs and lows, like, just get me off. I'm sick of it. But yeah, I'm not going to sit here and act like, he's not capable of being a guy that can drive them towards a victory. And it feels like that would be the most Jimmy Garoppolo thing ever after playing so poorly against Seattle to come back and then win this game on the road in a, another hostile environment. Like, that just kind of, it seems like that's just kind of how the story unfolds with him every time. Just when everybody starts to pile on the bandwagon if he's not good and start Trey Lance or run him out of town. That's when he comes and he plays his best. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if he does that. Or he might have some weird stat line where he quarterback sneaks it in 3 times. He has 3 rushing touchdowns and everyone's talking about how good he is. He's a Brady disciple who's so good at quarterback sneaking. Like, it just feels like one of those games where the narrative is going to, shift towards that. Hey, if he plays well, he deserves it. I'm not going to sit here and be bitter about it if he does. If he plays well enough, he does.
Yeah, we don't care. We want him to play well. We want to win games.
Exactly. But I just don't want to go into a game where it's like, all right, like, this is all on Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, we're going to ask you to throw 35 times. Like, can you get it done? Because I wonder if he feels like he can get it done at this point. And again, I'm not trying to sit here and act like I know what's going on in the mind of Jimmy Garoppolo, but you have to wonder after, like, there's so many times where it's so funny. I hate this narrative that he like plays better after he turns the ball over, because what happens is he turns the ball over and then they run screen passes. They run these little, plays within 3-4 yards of the line of scrimmage where all the yardage is generated after the catch. And then people are like, well, they always score after he throws picks. They all look at all these yards and these stats. If you watch him play after he throws interceptions, he gets very timid. He gets very, unsure of himself.
He gets in his head, and you can.
Yeah, if you make a mistake, I'm not trying to just dump on the guy. If you make a mistake, it's going to happen. Any of us in any profession. If you make a mistake, and it's especially if a lot of people are watching, you're going to be a little bit self-conscious. There's few people who have ice water in their veins and it just doesn't faze them and they come back. That's fine. But the majority of us don't do that, and that's the biggest thing for me. Is he hasn't looked like he hasn't looked very confident to me since that interception that he threw to Harrison Smith against the Vikings a couple of weeks ago. And he's had some great throws since then. Again, I'm not trying to sit here and act like he hasn't been, he's been so bad that he hasn't been able to, execute, but he has looked a little bit timid since then. And I think that he's missed a lot of throws that he normally does make, to his credit, since then. And I just think that when you keep turning the ball over the way he turns the ball over, people were dumping all over Mahomes early in the year. Mahomes he has 12 picks, I think, this year, and 7 of them have gone off his receivers' hands first. Like, if Jimmy was throwing balls that were just getting tipped off receivers' hands and being picked, I don't think he would be nearly as, concerned about it. I don't think fans would be getting on him as much, but it's not that. He's throwing balls directly into the chest of defenders, and that to me is what's super concerning, because when you're not able, you play the game, Bradley, you want to be able to react. You don't want to be thinking. Football is so fast, especially at the NFL level. You don't have time to think out there. And it feels like there's times where he's overthinking in spots where he should just be reacting. And that would be my biggest concern. But I do think that I will end it on, I do think he's capable of playing well enough to win this game. And I would be more than happy coming on here or writing an article Monday morning, whatever, saying, hey, Jimmy Garoppolo was the driving force behind this 49ers win. I just don't want to go into that game feeling super confident that that's what it's going to be,
Yeah, I agree. And I think this game is going to be a Jimmy Garoppolo game. It kind of has to be. We kind of have to go into this game. I know we've moved through a lot of this year, kind of like, we got the running game, we got Deebo Samuel, we got George Kittle, we got Brandon Ayuk. We're going to rely on just getting the ball into our weapons' hands, and they can do the rest. We got the Yak Gods for a reason. But it does feel like this game has a bit of that sense where Jimmy Garoppolo is going to have to come out and play some of his best ball if he's going to want to win this game, because we also know we're not healthy on the defensive side as well, especially those cornerbacks, and with the wide receivers that they're going to be bringing off the bus and trotting out there on that field. We don't know. This could be a very, very high scoring game. So we are going to need good Jimmy. And I think that's just one of the hardest things that, us as fans, you and I, who have been, evaluating and analyzing this roster since January, trying to figure out where the weaknesses are, the strengths are. We just understand that Jimmy Garoppolo is consistently inconsistent at this point. And so, to your point, we don't know what we're getting. We have no idea. And that's nerve-wracking, I think, as a fan. And we, as analysts, we want to be able to be coming back on next week, and we want to talk about the good throws. We want to be breaking down how he threaded the needle. He looked off the safety, because I feel like, just like in the Seattle game, you get the 2 types of Jimmy. You get the touchdown Jimmy to George Kittle, where he holds the safety by giving a little pump fake to one of the underneath outbreaking routes. It forces Diggs to kind of step up, which completely vacates the zone on the back end. And then he comes back to George and just drops in the touchdown. And you're like, oh, hell yeah. But then we get the Jimmy Garoppolo that is throwing to underneath defenders, throwing into triple coverage when you got a window over and you got a wide open wide receiver. So you made a lot of great points kind of about the Bengals defense, where their weaknesses are, and how we should theoretically be going into this game trying to attack them. But we also kind of recognize that it's a mixed bag at that point. One of the things that I did want to touch on, and I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on it, why like I loved that George Kittle went off and had a career day, what was it, 181 yards, 9 catches, and what was it, 2 touchdowns. You love to see that. But the interesting way, and I know you're a big Y-League guy, um, it felt like a lot of what he was being successful on were a lot of leaks, a lot of play action, things that were set up to look like run, and him just leaking out the backside and them just finding him open. That seems like something they could do every week, but it seems like that's something that they clearly identified and focused on for the game against Seattle, and it worked crazy well. With Deebo Samuel potentially coming back, is there a world where both guys can be successful at the same time, operating the same kind of things that Deebo Samuel has done in the past, but having more of an incorporation of the things that George Kittle did and was successful against Seattle? Can both things be true? Because it kind of feels like the offense starts force feeding like one person. Like Elijah Mitchell, we're going to give it to Elijah Mitchell, or Deebo Samuel, we're going to give Deebo Samuel, or we're going to get it to, George Kittle. What are your kind of thoughts on the dispersion of the football?
Well, I think with like last week, I think they kind of had to do that because if they put Kittle in the slot or they put him in a spot where it's clear they're going to be throwing the football, what Seattle and what a lot of teams do is they just bracket George Kittle, which basically means they have 2 guys assigned to him. They have a tremendous amount of attention paid towards him, and it's really hard when a good defense and a defense with a whole week to game plan can focus on taking away one player. And when you don't have another guy to step up in that spot, it makes it very difficult. Whereas, when everybody's healthy, Deebo Samuel's been playing great this season. If teams bracket Deebo and they focus on just taking away Deebo Samuel, guess what? George Kittle is going to gash you. When you don't have that secondary option, and maybe Ayuk, I think he's trending up. I will say real quick too, I think Ayuk's going to go over 100 yards for the first time this season in this game. So I think Ayuk is capable of being that guy as well, should Deebo not go. But I just think that it comes down to what Kyle is the kind of coach where he's going to, I don't want to say take what the defense gives him, but if he runs something and you can't stop it, he will run it 7-8 times in the same game. Like I remember watching the Minnesota game, they ran the same running play, like it felt like 7-8 times, like the same exact concept, same exact personnel, and the Vikings couldn't stop it. And they kept doing it over and over and over again.
Yep.
So I think if Cincinnati has a hard time stopping a specific passing concept, like I don't think, I love leak. You can really only get away running that one, maybe twice a game before our defense is going to catch on. For whatever it is worth, they did hit a leak play to, I think it was Marquise Goodwin in 2019 when they were in Cincinnati last time for a touchdown.
Yep, the wide open one.
So you can get away with that a couple times a game, but I just think that they will be better served getting into a rhythm early in the passing game, because again, like DJ Reader has been really good this season. The Bengals defense has done an adequate job at stopping the run. I would add, they have played a couple games against teams that run a similar rushing attack as the 49ers. They played Minnesota. They played Green Bay. They gave up 150 yards rushing to Minnesota, and they gave up 103 to Green Bay. The only team that runs a similar scheme that they really slowed down was the Jets, but the Jets are the Jets, so I'm not going to sit here and act like, that's overly concerning. I do think the fact Minnesota was able to run for 149 against them is a little encouraging. Dalvin Cook's a much better running back than anyone the 49ers have on the roster. I think he's the best running back in the league, so that's not a shot at anybody on the 49ers, but I just think that they'd be so much better served getting the passing attack going early and then forcing Cincinnati to start respecting that, getting them off the line of scrimmage a little bit, getting them out of, any of these bear fronts, these 6-1 fronts, this stuff where they're taking away the edges. And again, I think Jimmy Garoppolo is capable of doing that. If Deebo Samuel plays, I really think he's capable of doing that, because that's when you can start running these shallow crossers, these slants, these in-breaking drift routes, dig, all that stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out early. I would expect Kyle to actually throw a little bit more often, and that's one thing, anybody listening, maybe it ends up happening. It's something just to watch for, in my opinion. I think that they're going to be throwing in early downs early, and I think that they might come out in shotgun, in empty, and some of this stuff early on, rather than just running right at the Bengals defense. Because again, while they're not the Bucks where they really are just week to week shutting down every team's rushing attack. They are a respectable unit, and I do think that the 49ers would be better served to get them off balance early and make them feel uncomfortable by getting into a rhythm, throwing the ball. And then, a lot of times people say run to open up the pass. I think the 49ers need to do the inverse of that and pass to open up the run, get those safeties back off the line of scrimmage a little bit. So we'll see if they're able to do it, though.
So I think too, one of the things that we saw with the Vikings, typically with Harrison Smith, is they were showing cover two looks or they were showing these shell looks where they were going to drop into coverage. But essentially, what was happening is you just had the safeties come down squatting on all those in breaking routes. And I think one of the things that they were able to counter off of that is they were hitting outside slants to Ayuk or outside crossers to whoever was, you know, to counter the inside stoppage and or trying to get Debo to clear zones and you get Ayuk in the open spaces. Can you see a way of them trying to manipulate the defenses the same way? Because that feels like that's the book for stopping Jimmy Garoppolo. It's basically squatting on anything that's in breaking over the middle. We saw there was a I broke it down yesterday. There was probably like 3 or 4 examples where he locks onto the shallow cross and you have Brandon Ayuk streaking on the backside wide open in his zone. Um, can they take advantage of that, or how do you think the defense is going to come out and play Jimmy? How do you think, like, because I can imagine, like, if we're in the Bengals like defensive meeting room, they might be thinking some of this along the same lines of how you're saying the 49ers should attack them. So if you're wearing that Bengals defensive coordinator hat, how would you go after stopping Jimmy Garoppolo?
If it's me, I'm playing basically. If anybody remembers, I would do what the not the Vikings, sorry, the Dolphins did last season, and I would basically load up the line of scrimmage. I would run this kind of 6-1 front where you have 6 guys at the line of scrimmage, you have one linebacker, and then you essentially leave your outside corners on an island with a single deep safety. I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is a guy where you have to consistently respect him by putting 2 safeties over the top. And I just think that his lack of being willing to push the ball downfield plays into that as well. So I would just basically take away everything over the middle. And we saw last week he had that nice throw. It was like 2nd and 20 or whatever. He hit Ayuk for like 19 yards outside the numbers. He will occasionally, but his ability to consistently throw
I think that was
outside
the
the numbers
last drive of the
and
game,
throw,
though, too.
yeah, it was, yeah, and make some layered throws over
Yeah.
defenders. I wouldn't feel confident in it. And again, that's much easier said than done because it comes back to if you knew the 49ers were going to, throw the ball every snap, then yeah, you could absolutely do that. But you also have to respect the fact that they can run the ball and they can, regardless of who the running back is back there, the scheme and the offensive line is so talented that Hasty could go off for 130 in a game. Brian Hill could come in here and break off a big run. Like you have to still respect the run, which is why you can't fully sell out on it. But yeah, if I'm stopping Jimmy Garoppolo, I'm just loading up the middle of the field. I'm leaving, they don't have great corners. I don't know if Uzi is going to play this week, but Mike Hilton's really good. He's been a really good slot
Former
corner for a
Steelers
long time.
defensive back.
Yeah, and I think that Eli Apple, he's a former first-round pick. He's kind of bounced around the league a little bit, but he's more than adequate. Like, I would feel comfortable enough leaving those guys on the outside. And hey, if Jimmy beats you deep, then hey, you have to just kind of tip your cap. He's capable of doing it. I just don't think he's capable of doing it consistently. And I would much rather take my chances with him winning outside the numbers down the field rather than allowing the middle of the field to be compromised. But again, a lot of that comes back to Kyle Shanahan and Mike McDaniel are so good at scheming up some of these plays that they, in theory, it sounds really good. Just sit on the middle every single play, but you can't do that because then you're going to start getting gashed to the outside and they're going to get guys in space in the flat. So it really comes down to if you can sell out early and get Jimmy into a spot where he's going to throw on 3rd down, because as much as he's had some success on 3rd down, he also just, there's times where he stands back there, and I've seen people in the comments say, like, cement feet. He doesn't really, he locks onto a single read. So I would just kind of put him into a spot where he's going to throw the ball, and that's when you can get a little bit more diverse with your coverages. For whatever reason, he's been in the league for 8 seasons. He still can't see underneath defenders right in front of his face over the middle. So if you can incorporate, some kind of disguised coverage that's different post snap than what he saw pre snap, you probably will have some success. So I hate to say it, I could talk for hours about all the things you could do to scheme up against Jimmy Garoppolo because he's unfortunately given us that much. I don't say it,
the book is out on Jimmy Garoppolo.
The book is out, and it's a pretty lengthy book. Let's be honest. Like, there's a lot of stuff you can do. But I do also think that, again, the scheme is so good, and if they are able to throw the ball effectively on early downs and then get into 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3, where the defense can't sell out against the pass and they have to respect the 49ers running the football, I think they'll be okay. I actually think the 49ers will be, capable of putting up points. Like, I don't think they're going to struggle moving the ball within the 20s, like, in between the 20 of their own yard line, the opponent's 20. But I think when they get into the red zone is where it's really going to be. And they've been the best red zone offense in the league this season, which is like astounding when you think about it. But they really, really can't afford to settle for field goals consistently against this team. So I think that they, like, if you get into a spot where it's like 4th and 3, 4th and 2 on like the 12-yard line, like, I would go for it. Like, I would be overly aggressive. And I think we saw Kyle be willing to do that against Arizona when it was apparent that even though they held them to 17 points, like, Arizona had this explosive offense, and you probably weren't going to win a game on the road kicking field goals like that. So I just think he needs to take that same approach in this game and be a little bit more willing to, if it's 4th and inches, like, yeah, it's easy to roll out your team and go for it. But again, if it's 4th and 3 and there's an easy 3 points there, it takes a little bit of guts to, send your offense back out on the field. And I think this is a game where he needs to do that and maximize those. And they've been really effective. It sucks it didn't work out, but that play call they ran on that last 4th down in Seattle, if Carlos Dunlap doesn't make a great play on that ball, it's a touchdown. Yeah, he gets in. So I think that they have the chemistry and capability to execute in that red zone, in that, where the field is really minimized there. I just think that they need to be more aggressive and go for it a lot on 4th down if the situation presents itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of going back to that last red zone series too, I think Elijah Mitchell could have scored a touchdown too if he bounces it and hits the hole to the left. That was wide open in front of him. Instead, he cut back into the grain of the defense and got stopped. But I hear what you're saying. So I think at the end of the day, to kind of put a bow on it, I think we're confident that the scheme is there. I think we're confident that whether it's dialed up in the run game, how they dial it up, who gets involved and how they get involved, they're capable. They can do it. It's the execution at the end of the day that is what is going to rule if the 49ers get a win in Cincinnati or not, really. Like, because I think that's what this year has been. I think we've seen on tape. I tweeted about it yesterday because I just was like watching the Seattle tape and I'm just like, man, missed big play, missed read, missed block, penalty, missed touchdown. I'm just like, this is unbelievable. Like, it felt like every other play they left something on the field. So it just comes down to, it just comes down to execution. And why they're not executing, that's a conversation for a different day. But I know this question's asked ad nauseum, so we're going to ask it too. Is this, do we get Trey Lance package today? What's the vibe? Or let me say Trey Lance package on Sunday.
I think that they should, and I don't think they will. And I don't know if that's a good enough answer. If it was me, yeah, I would, especially with the lack of firepower they have in the running back room due to injuries. But I think that, as much as there is something to be said about what Kyle said about throwing off his rhythm and defensive fronts changing based on Lance or Jimmy being in there, I think a lot of it does have to do with the human element too. And I imagine, he said that it didn't ruffle any feathers when Lance came in through the first touchdown of the year in Detroit. I don't believe that for a second. And I think that there's definitely
no one believes that for a second.
I think that that kind of is what's preventing them from doing it. But again, we got fed all off season that it's not about, just one of these quarterbacks. It's going to be that was the 49ers whole, thing was that no, it's going to be both these guys this year. We have a 2 quarterback system. We saw it in the Raiders preseason game. We obviously saw it in the Lions game where they were able to, just swap these guys out mid-drive. And I understand it's not the most
Saw it in
ideal
Green Bay
thing.
as well.
Yeah, I understand it's not the most ideal thing, but I just think we've gotten to a point now where I don't expect to see Trey Lance out there again this season unless Jimmy Garoppolo gets, hurt or plays so poorly that he is, benched. But I wouldn't do that personally. Like, I really like Kyle Shanahan. I don't agree with everything he does. And that's another thing is I think that it just adds a dynamic element to your offense that otherwise isn't there right now, especially in the running game. But at the same time, too, I do understand they only have a certain amount of practice reps in a given week, and blocking for Trey Lance running the football is a lot different than blocking for JaMychal Hasty or Brian Hill or Jeff Wilson and these guys. And they really can't afford another game like Arizona where it was such a short week. They didn't have really time to gel. And a lot of those penalties were a result of that uncomfortability together. So, I can see why they wouldn't do it, but I'm just like, at this point, like, what do you have to lose? And that's kind of my stance, is that I think it just adds a dynamic element that is currently lacking when you have those running back injuries factored in.
Hey man, Trey Lance won Scout Player of the Week. He's ready to go. Let's go. We're not seeing Trey Lance. I agree. The only way we see Trey Lance is if an injury occurs. Again, we were even thinking, oh, do we see Trey Lance in Seattle after the second interception? Nope, not going to see Trey Lance. So this is a topic that we've batted over the head time and time again. It's basically been bludgeoned to death at this point. But I think we agree from a pure football on the field standpoint. Obviously, Trey Lance gives the 49ers different wrinkles, different looks, different opportunities. They have a potential to utilize his skill set and could, but it comes down to the human element, what that does to a football team when you are in and out with the position that is the quarterback position. One of the leaders of the offense. Obviously, we understand that the move was not well received, and not by any fault by Trey Lance. But it is what it's, again, like, I feel like I've said this nonstop this week. It is what it is. There's nothing we can do to really change it. So I think we should all expect moving forward that we're not going to see Trey Lance, kind of like Jordan's talking about, unless we just see a catastrophic injury and or a catastrophic game. But we'll see. We'll see if that ever comes. It does feel like this game is turning out to be, it's gonna just, oh man, it just keeps coming back to Jimmy, right? It just keeps coming back to Jimmy, and it just doesn't feel great. But also on the flip side, like you've talked about, whenever it doesn't feel great, we've also seen good Jimmy come out and perform. I think one of the quotes that has always stuck in my head that came from Jimmy Garoppolo was, he just loves being the underdog. He really does. He said it out loud. He vocalized it. He's like, I enjoy being the underdog. So I think he performs better without the pressure. We talk about mental, the way he reads the field, things like that. When your back's against it and you're firing and you're not in your head worrying about, am I going to make a mistake? Am I pressing too much? And you're just playing. That's when we see good Jimmy Garoppolo, when he's just playing. It's when he's pressing, it feels like everything goes to crap. But hopefully with this game against the Bengals, we get good Jimmy. We all want good Jimmy because we want to go to the playoffs. Do you think this team has a shot at the playoffs, Jordan? I know we're slated. I'm trying to take the mentality of 1 week at a time. I know there's 5 games left. I know there are winnable games on the docket, but I'm just looking at it as a 1-game season. If the playoffs were to start today, 49ers aren't in. They're the 7th seed, but you also got the Vikings. They won last night. So we're kind of, with them trying to go after that 7th seed. Is playoffs even something that you're thinking about? Is that even something that's like, how are you viewing that? Because fans do look forward, right? They want to know, is the season over or are we in the playoffs? Half the fans think it's over. half the fans still think we got a shot at the playoffs. How do you kind of rationalize where we're at right now in the season?
Real quick, I just wanted to answer because Macho pointed out in the chat, and thank you for saying it. I had my notes mixed up, actually. The Bengals ran for 149. They didn't give up 149. He was right about the Vikings game. It was Green Bay and Cleveland that run similar schemes to the 49ers where they struggled a little bit, giving up over 130 yards in both those games. But he is right. They did do a good job of slowing down Dalvin Cook. They have been a very good run defense over the course of the season. I just had my numbers mixed up, and it was 149 for the Bengals offense, not for the defense. So my apologies, but thank you for pointing that out. In terms of the 49ers making the playoffs, like they really have to fall on their face not to make it. And here's why I say that. So right now they are 6-6. If they lose this week, they would be tied. The Vikings would be 6-7. The Eagles are 6-7. The Panthers are 5-7, and the Falcons are 5-7. They beat the Vikings and they beat the Eagles. The head-to-head is how that's the first thing that they go to for tiebreakers if they finish with the same record. So the 49ers already have the edge on the Vikings. They already have the edge on the Eagles. And if they win that Falcons game, which they should, if they don't win that game, they don't belong in the playoffs. They would have the edge over three of those teams. The Panthers are kind of falling apart. I don't think that they are a team that's going to even match the 49ers final record. So yeah, I think in the same turn, that same boat for me. So I think the 49ers really are in a favorable spot where the only other team they're really going to be jockeying for position with is Washington. I expect Washington to lose to the Cowboys this week. So I think that the Niners have a chance to jump back into that 6th seed. So again, I don't think it's as much that like I'm so confident that the Niners are such a good team they're not going to miss the playoffs. I just think that they handled business against the teams they needed to thus far, being the Eagles and the Vikings, and the fact that they have the Falcons coming up on the schedule, coupled with the fact that the other teams in the mix don't really strike me as teams that are going to get hot and go on a run. I think it's just going to kind of fall into their lap, if anything. Like, I do think they're capable of getting it together and showing they are a team. We saw that 3-game win streak. We can see a path to them being, you know, a team that belongs in the playoffs, but I think they're just going to end up there by default, which is basically my answer. I think that they've done enough early in the season that it's going to fall into place later in the season, given the head-to-head tiebreakers.
Got you. I was trying to pull up the visual, but internet's doing great things. You can see the 49ers down there at 7. You can see who's in the hunt. So just like Jordan said, like it's going to be kind of hard not to make the playoffs at this point. I mean, obviously the range of outcome is absolutely there, but with the teams that are in the hunt, you got the Falcons still on the schedule. We got the Rams still on the schedule. So those are 2 games right there that you can kind of control your destiny a little bit. And we also understand, you know, Texans, whatever. They're AFC anyway, so it doesn't matter, right? So we'll see what happens in regards to the entire playoff situation. Do you feel like if the 49ers lose this game, though, are they out of it? Are you kind of are your thoughts of their chances going down at that point?
No, I think they realistically need to win one. So they have to take care of business against the Falcons. They have to take care of business against the Texans. Those are games that they'll both be favored in at home. So I think that those games are, you know, I don't say must win in the sense that like it's just like you can't lose those games. Like you have to, they're must win games. And then I think that they're going to have to win one of the 3 against Tennessee, the Rams, and the Bengals this week. And even if they lose to the Bengals this week, like the Rams are probably going to be in a spot where they're too far out from the playing for the 1 seed. The Cardinals probably will have the division wrapped up by then. So I could easily see a scenario. Sean McVay has historically rested players. So I could see a scenario where they're not really playing for much in that spot. So I could see them sitting a Matthew Stafford, maybe sitting a Cooper Kupp, sitting an Aaron Donald and a Jalen Ramsey. So I think that, it's not something to bank on, but I could see it unfolding that way. I really don't like the 49ers' chances in that short week game against the Titans. A West Coast team traveling to the East Coast on 3 days rest is historically doesn't bode well for that team. So to me, it really comes down, and they could win that game. I'm not saying that it's just an automatic loss, but it really comes down to they need to win one of either this game or that Week 18 game against the Rams. And I just think even if they drop this one, the way it could shake out with the Rams resting players, it's not totally bad. They just can't afford to lose those, either the Texans or the Falcons game. Because if they lose one of those games, then things get really dicey pretty fast. But I expected them. I had them at 10-7 coming into the season. I don't know that they'll finish at that now. They have a chance to. I think 9-8 is a little bit more realistic, but if they can get to 10-7, I think that would be, especially given where they were early in the season. I think that they can feel pretty good about the way things unfolded, because they were never a Super Bowl team. I don't think that it's easy to buy
Right.
into the fact that they were there a couple of years ago and they have a lot of talent on the team. But to me, if they got to double-digit wins in a playoff berth, that would have been a successful season. And that's still well within the realm of possibility. And if they win this week, I think it's all but guaranteed, because I do think that they're capable of winning 3 of the last 4. But yeah, they just need to focus 1 week at a time. But yeah, again, the 49ers would have to pretty much lose out to miss the playoffs at this point. They could, if they go like 1-4, they probably wouldn't make it. But yeah, they would really have to fall on their face hard to not get in at this point.
Right. So I know a lot of the conversation and discourse amongst a lot of people on Twitter or wherever you digest your social uh, information around the 49ers. There's a lot of people who think the season is over and it's time to start developing everyone. But there is a lot of ranges of outcomes where the 49ers still find a way to limp into the playoffs. And I think at the end of the day, that's all we really want. I think you and I can agree as content creators and people who cover the team, we want them to go to the playoffs. That would be fantastic. We would love to talk 49ers football past week 18 other than the draft, although you and I are going to be dumb hyped to talk draft stuff and off-season content. I would still love the 49ers to make it to the playoffs. Niner Cali Boy says, how does Trey Lance get rewarded for learning and excusing everybody else's but can play in ours because he's not ready? Hashtag play Trey. Not necessarily understanding it. I don't know if you do, Jordan, but it does sound like he just wants Trey to play and get developed and, I don't know, get a shot, right? But I
I
think it's
think
safe to say that
I
he's
think it's
probably not going to.
I could be wrong, but I think he's asking kind of like, why are the other rookies getting to play and getting excuses for whatever's happening? But like, all they're really talking about with Trey Lance is that he's like learning behind the scenes and stuff. Uh, I think that there is a lot of benefit to, having added time in the film room where you're not counted on to be the guy every week, and you could focus a little bit more on maybe working on, your throwing mechanics and some stuff that we may not, um, think about week to week. But
Verbalizing the playbook,
yeah,
understanding your personnel better. Like there you can gain and
I
develop
I
without
I do
starting.
think I do think though that like it's really hard, because almost everybody that I talk to who played the game at a high level, whether it was college, NFL, they all are adamant that game reps are really what's going to help them. And that even though it's nice to sit and read the playbook and, do that, from what we heard, Trey Lance was pretty, because the problem that most rookies have is not only understanding the playbook, but being able to relay a play call and understand where everyone's going to be and, confidently verbalize the play call that's coming in. And I don't think Trey Lance has struggled with that at all. I do think there's been times where he has struggled to see the proper read, or he's gone to the wrong spot in his progression. There's been times where he's been a little bit late, and that's all understandable. He's a rookie, and he's a rookie who only played 1 game in his final year of college. At a level, I don't want to downplay the FCS competition, but the level of speed from any level of college competition to the NFL is a big, it's a drastic adjustment. I think that the 49ers are just in a spot where they committed to Jimmy. And as I saw people in the chat talking about earlier, they were right. It's too late to change now. Like, you kind of are,
It's too late.
once you got through the bye week and you got past that
Yep.
midpoint of the season, you're kind of stuck with it. And I think that at this point, as much as I would like to see Trey Lance play, I'm just kind of like, hey, I can wait till next season. And Brad and I talked about it earlier in the week. I think that it's much better for Trey Lance himself at this point. This is obviously not with the power of hindsight saying you could go back to week 1 and change things, but at this point in week 14, I think it would be better for his development if you just give him a clean slate in the offseason. You cut ties with Jimmy, you trade him, you do whatever you do with him. You make it known that Trey is number 1. So when he comes in to OTAs, to mini camp, to training camp, he's the guy. He's the one getting reps with the first team. He's the one they're building the entire install around with him in mind. And I just think that would serve him so much better than at this point in week 14 with a few weeks left. Like, like I said, it would take a really horrendous performance from Jimmy Garoppolo, I think, to see Trey Lance come in. Like he would have to go out and have like a Nathan Peterman half where he like throws 4 interceptions in the first 5 possessions or something. And even then, I don't know if they would do it. So I understand the
Right.
frustration, but I do think that they need to it'd be unfair to Trey Lance to throw him out there at this point in the season. It'd be I think he'd be much better served, and it would be more fair to him and his development if you give him the keys with a clean slate rather than coming in to clean up somebody else's mess where you're down 3 or 4 scores and the game in the middle of week 15 or something like that. I just don't think it's very viable.
Well, we saw it happen in week 4. Jimmy went down at halftime. Trey comes in to clean up the mess, and it was a mess that they couldn't manage. They couldn't clean it up. It wasn't great. But again, we understand why. He is not preparing as a starter. He's a rookie. Like it's just a really bad spot to put a guy into. I put this poll out. I'm gonna ask you, what the hell? How would you grade the 49ers handling of the 2021 quarterback room?
I saw on your poll, I voted D, and the only reason I voted D was because there wasn't an F option, but they failed it. They flunked it. They bombed it. They basically took their grade is my grade on like 90% of my tests in high school. They failed it miserably. It was awful. They could have done a lot better. I just think that so in theory, it sounded really good. And I kind of bought into all right, like you can win with a veteran. You can, develop the rookie who's a little bit raw. I love Trey Lance. Brad and I watched hours and hours and hours of his tape. We pretty much watched every snap that he had in college. And you could see there was a path to him being a little bit raw, but the biggest mistake they made was just not finding an adequate veteran replacement. And there were plenty of them out there who could have replicated the production you're getting from Jimmy without the emotional tie to Jimmy. Because I think, again, the human element comes into play here. I can tell you, no matter how much money I'm getting paid, if I worked at a job and my boss came in and they're like, hey, this is Trey Lance. He's going to replace you. Not yet, but whenever he's ready, he's replacing
You're
you.
going to train him first.
Yeah,
You're
we're
going
going
to
to train
teach
him.
him
And we're going to
everything
need you.
you know
Yeah.
from your experiences, and then he's going to take over your
take
job.
him under your wing and train him to take your job. Like, no matter how much, I know Jimmy's getting paid a bunch of money, but that's kind of,
well, not only that too, but like, okay, see this guy that he manages, all these people that report direct to him. They're eventually going to report direct to you, but right now it's him, and they're all sticking with him. But they'll report to you eventually, but not now. Him.
Yeah,
Not now.
and
Him.
it makes no sense to me. And again, that may not be the greatest analogy. I admittedly am not great with analogies, but I don't understand why there was such a need to want to keep Jimmy around, especially at the cost. Because again, he's a guy that, yeah, I understand they've won with, and I understand they've had success with, but everything I watched from him on tape, I don't see how they couldn't have gotten that similar production from one of the number of veteran quarterbacks that were kind of, just journeyman guys that are just, stopgap average starters that you could come in that you wouldn't have the emotional attachment to Jimmy. And it's not just the fan base. Like, you have to understand that the players have tasted success with Jimmy Garoppolo as the quarterback. And there's a lot of 49ers who've been on this team for a few seasons who have only really known success when Jimmy's been the quarterback. And there's been a lot of other guys coming into that starting quarterback spot and they haven't won with. And it's very difficult to manage the egos, or not the egos, but manage the, emotion and outlook of 53 guys at a given time, 90 during the, training camp period. Like, that's way too many people to sit there and factor in. I'm not saying that Kyle Shanahan needs to make his personnel decisions based on the feelings of all the players on his team.
Right.
But I just think it created such an unnecessary amount of like drama that didn't really need to be there. Because admittedly, like, let's be honest, if like Andy Dalton or like Joe Flacco or Gardner Minshew or one of these guys was starting in place of Jimmy, how big is the drop off from Jimmy? I'm not saying that they're better than Jimmy, but is the drop off that significant that, Teddy Bridgewater at $5 million? Like, I don't think Teddy Bridgewater is better than Jimmy Garoppolo per se, but I do also think that
They're
I would much rather have Teddy at $5 million than Jimmy at 20, particularly when you see the issues that the 49ers have had with depth in some areas. So I just think that the biggest mistake they made wasn't necessarily bringing in a veteran to usher in Trey Lance and bring in the Trey Lance era at a timeline that they felt was most suitable for Trey to optimize his ability. The mistake was having Jimmy Garoppolo conduct that train when you basically told him that he's getting thrown off the train at the end of the season. Like that to me just creates such an uncomfortable environment. And I actually, as much as again, I don't think that Jimmy Garoppolo is that great. I'm not a huge fan of his, but I have to applaud the professionalism that he's had
Oh,
throughout the course
hell
of the
yeah.
season, because he could have been extremely petty. And anybody who remembers like the Green Bay, like the Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers days, like it's very easy to not have the level of professionalism that Garoppolo's had. So I at least have to tip my cap to him there. Like he's at least, you know, as far as we know, whatever he does behind closed doors, that's his business. But in the public eye, he's done a very good job of being a leader. And I do have a lot of respect for that.
Absolutely. And I think that's important because obviously when we talk about football, especially on shows like this, like we're really just kind of breaking down the film. We're trying to break down like the X's and O's and what doesn't happen and doesn't occur or why it happens. And sometimes that makes it sound like, yeah, we're not talking about Jimmy Garoppolo in the greatest light. But to be honest, what he's had to deal with again the entire offseason, with the trade speculation, with Deshaun Watson, Stafford, Darnold, to then the draft speculation. I mean, this guy, Jimmy Garoppolo, was slated to head out to Tennessee to do a team workout with all his guys in the offseason. He had to cancel it. They had to cancel last minute because of the trade speculation because they didn't know if he was going to be on the team. So they had to they didn't do that. And so those little things, we know those we can point to those things and be like, that's how great teams are built. The continuity, the offseason, the off-field stuff, the gelling in the offseason, that can contribute to on-field success. And we're racking our brains. Why can't they do it? Why are they so inconsistent? Why is it just like the tale of two teams? And that might be the underlying theme of it all. Is it's just thinking that we could draft the future while keeping the guy to keep the seat warm for the guy of the future, but the whole team responds to the guy keeping the seat warm. I was it you? Did we use mismanaged? Was that a word that we threw out?
I
I
mean,
think
it's
maybe on
appropriate.
Tuesday.
It fits. And like I would add too, like I understand people not really wanting to cry crocodile tears and play the violin for Jimmy
Of
Garoppolo, who's
course.
making like $25 million this year. I completely understand that. I'm just saying that he could have made that 25 million and not handled it as well as he did. So I at least have to give the guy his due there. Like I do think he's handled it about as well as you can, given the
Yes.
circumstances. And
Yes.
I also don't think that it's on him. Like it's a really weird dynamic because again, like the 49ers front office, I think should have moved on from him. They should have cut ties. The second they made the trade up for Trey Lance, it became extremely uncomfortable to keep him around. This wasn't a situation where it was like, oh, we're just like when he was drafted behind Brady and it was clear that that was like a long-term thing, or Jordan Love and Aaron Rodgers. Like it was very evident after Brad mentioned going after Stafford and checking in on Watson and checking in on
Gosh,
Brady.
dude.
Like it's very obvious what they've been
Players
trying to
seeing
do
all
for a
of it.
long
Trust
time.
me. They see
Yeah. So
all of that.
yeah. So like if we're seeing it, like I promise you that Jimmy is representation. All these guys are seeing it. So I think the biggest mistake is that. But at the same time, like I can't fault Jimmy Garoppolo for not pounding the table and being like, hey, trade me to another team that's probably not going to pay me $25 million. Like, dude, like I wouldn't run from 25 million. I'd question what's going on with Jimmy Garoppolo if he ran from 25 million. So I just think it's a
Yeah.
messy situation that could have been avoided. And unfortunately, like the 49ers are kind of like the grown-ups in the room who are enabling this to all happen. And I don't fault Jimmy Garoppolo for being, kind of, again, he showed up. He's like, hey, I'm coming here. I'm getting a paycheck every week. Like, I don't fault him for that. But I do fault the 49ers in a sense for not foreseeing that there would probably be an issue with the human element here. And it's been pretty under wraps. It's not like we're getting these reports every single week where there's this huge dysfunction on the team. But I also do think that there is a lot of underlying drama that didn't need to be there. And a lot of every week they're asking questions about it and this and that. Like if they had another quarterback in there that Lance probably would have replaced by now, I just don't think it would have been the same. And hey, if Jimmy makes the playoffs and they win 10 games and they get in and maybe they steal a game in the playoffs, maybe what I'm saying right now sounds really stupid because I am of the belief that if they get into the playoffs, that's the kind of start they need. I don't think it's a Super Bowl or bust thing. They just need to be a team that's getting into the playoffs and like building that winning culture. So I'll happily eat crow if that happens. But I just also think that he's not really the driving force behind that. And you could have gotten much better value with another veteran for a fifth of the price rather than paying him all that money while putting him through like, hey, we're just going to give you 25 million to put you through an extremely uncomfortable situation for 8 months. Like, it kind of just doesn't seem like the most ideal situation.
Well, and it does feel like too, well, the 49ers went into this training camp with depth concerns at cornerback. Maybe there could have been an opportunity to shell out a couple more dollars to some better pieces at the position. Again, 27 million, 26 million dollars open up. Again, we take a page out of the Patriots book. They get Mac Jones, and they're instantly like, they understand this dynamic. They've lived this dynamic with who? Tom Brady and Jimmy Garoppolo. They've had the dynamic. They've had the awkwardness. Again, Tom Brady, Jimmy Garoppolo, they didn't get along because Jimmy Garoppolo was the heir apparent, right? Tom Brady was the GOAT, yet he was keeping the seat warm for this guy named Jimmy. That didn't create a great environment, to the point where, right, they made, I think it was, I mean, the details are what they are. I'm kind of going off hearsay at this point, but the details were essentially, Tom Brady didn't want Jimmy Garoppolo there anymore, so they had to trade him. They had to get rid of him, because it was Tom Brady wanted to keep continuing to play. So we've been there. We know what it is. Obviously, tons of stuff at play other than just football itself. Money Mark 71 says Jimmy gives us the best chance to win. Let Lance continue to develop and be ready for next year. Great QBs in this league have sat 1, 2, 3 years and have had Hall of Fame careers. Great show. Shout out Money for the contribution. And I mean, nothing you said was wrong. Nothing you said was wrong. I don't know what your take is on this, Jordan, but would Trey Lance give us the best shot to win? I mean, trying to conceptualize the fact that he hasn't been working with the first strings, offensive line, and they haven't really been running his offense, and he's been doing scout team. Like, it's a double-edged sword because I think a part of us understand the skill set that's available that he has, and I think both you and I believe in Trey Lance and his ability and what he can do. So it's a bit of like a double-edged sword. But I mean, just what are your thoughts on that based on, I guess, the circumstances that we currently sit in? Did Jimmy give us the best chance to win and just keep Lance to develop? What are your thoughts on that?
So it's really hard because I think it gets super subjective because we have nothing really objective to fall back on. I do think that there were some very encouraging things from the one start that Lance did have where they moved the ball pretty well consistently. They obviously had those fourth down conversions that didn't work out well. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that the offensive line was basically running an entirely different blocking scheme, blocking for a totally different kind of quarterback than they had been all year. And I think that's why we saw a lot of holding penalties, a lot of these, minor things that would probably get sorted out over the course of time. But I also do think that there's a reason why Jimmy did start week one. I was there for training camp, and Jimmy did do better in move the ball drills when they were doing 2-minute drill, 4-minute offense, red zone stuff, situational stuff. Jimmy looked better, which is, you would like to think the guy who's the incumbent starter, who's been in the league for almost a decade, would look better than the 21-year-old rookie. And I think Jimmy did. So I don't think it's necessarily fair to I'm not going to sit here and say definitively, yeah, I know Trey Lance would have been better, but I don't know that he would have been any worse. And that's the discussion I think that needs to happen, because I think the point you make about great QB sitting is valid. But if we go back in recent history with some of these guys who have done that, Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers sat for, I think, 3 full seasons. But the Packers had a Hall of Fame quarterback that led them to an NFC Championship game. The Chiefs had Mahomes sit for a season. Alex Smith had one of the better seasons of any quarterback in recent history. If you go by just efficiency metrics and stuff like that, in 2017, he was one of the better quarterbacks in the league that year. So you could kind of understand why. The biggest problem I think that people have with this debate of whether Trey would be better or if they would be having the same record and whatnot is that we've just seen so much inconsistency from Jimmy over the course of this season that, again, it comes back to, I'm not sitting here pounding the table saying, oh my God, Trey Lance would be so much better. They'd be 8-4 and they'd be winning this and that. But when I see Jimmy making these rookie mistakes over and over and over again, and it's the 8th year that he's been in the league, the fourth year that he's been in this offense, I do tend to come back to, well, I would almost rather see the rookie making these mistakes and hopefully learning from them than seeing the veteran make them over and over again. So I guess to answer, like, again, I'm not going to objectively sit here and say I think Trey Lance would have been better, but I think that the 49ers would be in a very similar, if not identical situation if you had, say, like Gardner Minshew and Trey Lance playing this year, or Teddy Bridgewater and Trey Lance playing this year. And again, I'm not saying that I think that those guys are objectively better than Jimmy Garoppolo, but I do think that the consistency that you get from those guys, while you may not get some of the highs that you get from Jimmy, where he's making these tight window throws and he's having these big clutch third down conversions, you're also not getting a lot of the lows that come with him too. And I think that Kyle Shanahan's scheme takes care of so much stuff that if you just get an adequate starting level guy that's one of the top 30, 25, 30 guys in the league, you're going to be able to put up points. So at this point in time, like, does Jimmy give them the best chance to win? Like, Kyle clearly feels that way. Otherwise, Lance would be starting. I just don't think that it's fair either way to definitively say that Trey Lance would be better, but I don't think it's fair to say that he would be worse either, because everything we saw pointed to the fact that with a few weeks to gel, they probably would be moving the ball. We'd see a lot more creativity in the run game. We'd see a lot more dynamic stuff within the offense that we're not seeing. And that's no disrespect to Jimmy Garoppolo. Trey Lance is just a freak athlete that has a huge arm and can run the ball. And he's like 6'4", like 225 or whatever he is. Like, that in the open field is tough to bring down. And I just think, again, that it comes back to it's a great question. I just think that nobody can really answer it with any objectivity. We're all going to feel differently about it.
Right.
And I think that's what makes it a little bit more of a fun debate, because there really isn't a definitive answer to be had here.
Right. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just, what do you feel? How do you view player development? How do you view X player and X development? Like, there's so many variables that there is no correct answer. It's just kind of based on how you view and you your perception of development and what you think's works and what doesn't. I think one of the things that, like, maybe could have been aided by Trey Lance starting this year, and maybe if the 49ers are in this kind of same spot and, record wise, and it's kind of 1 foot in the playoffs, 1 foot out. But if Trey Lance is playing well, and I think you've spoken to this in the past too, is that if Trey Lance is playing well going out of this year, that there's so much positive momentum that would have trickled into the offseason, would have trickled into OTAs, would have trickled in just the fan perception alone. Because now, let's say what happens if they stick with Jimmy gets traded or moved. There's still going to be the question of, what is Trey Lance? Who is he? Is he the guy? We know 49er fans, a lot of them are never happy, and that's okay. But we also recognize that they're going to be asking those questions all offseason. They're going to be saying, well, did we draft the right guy? We probably should have drafted Mac Jones. We probably should have drafted Justin Fields. We going down the list. Should we trade? I've heard and had multiple people ask me if the 49ers should trade Trey Lance for Aaron Rodgers. And I mean, I understand, like, Aaron Rodgers is one of the best to ever grace the field, but it's just like, that's what we're going to, those are the conversations we're going to be having this offseason with Trey Lance not starting, just because no one knows. We don't know what he is, where he is. DJ's asking where I stand kind of in this situation. If it was up to me, the reason why I had developed imaginary quarterback competition at training camp when Jordan and I was there is because I felt this situation. I felt that keeping both Jimmy Garoppolo, drafting a rookie quarterback, I thought it was a mistake because of the human element of football and what you need from the quarterback position, how it trickles down to the rest of the offense, the awkwardness and the way they went about it. I was definitely in the camp of start Trey Lance week 1, grow and learn week to week. I thought he was capable enough based on everything that we saw in college, coming out of NDSU in a play action heavy pro style, in the sense of the way Kyle runs it, fullback, multiple tight ends, all those kinds of things. It felt like an opportunity for Trey Lance to come in and really hit the ground running. But as we know, that's not what happened. And I think as a result, they tried to sell it as a bill of two quarterback system. But in reality, the continuation of the two quarterback system was causing problems and causing issues internally, externally. Um, so that essentially feels like they had to just kind of can it and just really push it to 2022. I think Trey Lance would have been successful in year one. I think Trey Lance, I think you saw some of it in the Cardinals game, again, with the lack of preparation, and having the ability to prepare as the starter for multiple weeks before he got that start. I just gave you a glimpse of what he's capable of and understanding that how development works. um, I think he could have developed into a really good spot in the year. Record wise, they're probably in the same boat. Um, on the other hand, you have issues like say for example, Tom Compton goes down with or McGlinchey goes down with the injury. Well, that doesn't bode well for Jimmy Garoppolo because we understand that Jimmy Garoppolo is very statuesque in regards to how he moves within the pocket. He doesn't have the type of a pocket awareness where he feels pressure, steps up within the pocket, flows within the natural lanes in the pocket. I would say Mac Jones right now at this point in his career has better pocket awareness than Jimmy Garoppolo in the sense of feeling pressure and maneuvering pressure. So the flip side of having Trey Lance in and playing right now is that okay, maybe our guy Tom Compton can get beat in certain situations, especially in drop back passing situations where you have to let longer developing routes basically develop and you have to have these offensive linemen maybe pass block for 3 seconds. With Tom Compton, you're not that's not what you want from Tom Compton. You're trying to scheme away from having Tom Compton to pass block for 3 seconds. With a guy like Trey Lance, you can put so many band-aids on those types of things with his ability to run and create. And with the additional development skills that come along of playing what he would be in game 13 up until this point if he started week one, the quarterback that we would have saw week one versus week now is probably night and day. So I'm of the camp, you know, I think it's clear I wanted Trey to start week one. I thought that we could be in the same boat. I was extremely weary of the disjointed locker room starting in January when they started poking around Deshaun Watson. So I've been extremely cognizant and sensitive, and obviously some of the people that I've spoken to who have the information, they understand that it's kind of all falling in line. So it is what it is. Again, the saying that I really feel like keep saying nonstop. It is what it is right now, but I felt like Trey was ready to go week one. Again, you and I were there at camp. We were there when they put on the pads. First 2 day of pads is the Trey Lance show. Remember, we had the bomb to Trent Sherfield when I dropped my AirPods down in the bleacher section, and we had one of our some random guy went and got my AirPods, and then we got the play where Trey Lance is rolling out to his left and just delivers a bomb to Trent Sherfield. So, I mean, like I said, it is what it is. We're just kind of debating. We're debating revisionist history at this point.
I do think real quick too, I would add, I think that it's hard to say, it's hard to make comparisons based on what's worked in past for other teams and having guys sit. So I'll give you a perfect example. Like when Aaron Rodgers sat, the salary cap was a lot smaller, but so was the rookie contract for a guy like that, picked in the later half of the first round. So Aaron Rodgers' rookie year, he accounted for 1.8% of the cap. This year, Trey Lance is accounting for double that. And I think that the fact that it goes up every year as cap hits go from 6.2 to 7.7 to 9.3 to 10.8, so much of the benefit of going with a rookie guy and getting a young rookie quarterback is the alleviation it gives you in terms of spreading that salary around to other veterans. And we know the 49ers are going into next season in a spot where they have a bunch of these guys on 1-year deals or guys whose deals are happening to expire at the same time. So I do think it was much easier for the Packers to sit there. Aaron Rodgers signed like a 5-year, $7 million deal when he came out. So when he sat there for 3 years, it really wasn't costing them that much. the
And they
49ers
he
can't
fell
afford.
into his lap
Yeah,
like you're talking about.
this first year, okay, maybe you can justify it, but I think honestly, paying Trey Lance $7 and almost $8 million to sit is more egregious than paying Jimmy Garoppolo 25 or 24 million to play. And I think that's why I think it ended. I made a joke last week, like if I saw one more report about them bringing Jimmy back next year, I was going to launch my phone into the sun, just because I like. There's so many reasons I don't want to see it happen, but it just doesn't make sense either. So I do think that there was a time where it was more friendly to roster construction to allow a rookie, particularly a first round rookie quarterback, to sit and develop. But the way that contracts are structured with the rookie wage scale, you're so much better served taking advantage of the quarterback on a rookie deal. And
Yeah.
again, this season's probably pretty much spoken for. It's
Yeah, it
okay. It
is.
happened. There's nothing we can do to change it. But going
Right.
forward, you have 3 more years of him on extremely, extremely affordable deals where he'll be making less than 10 million. And then the 5th-year option, which if he ends up panning out and playing really well, will be an additional year. And the 49ers can then get in the creative space with their, cap numbers and bonuses and prorated money and all that stuff. But effectively, it's really difficult to sit there and say, let a QB sit on the bench for multiple seasons when they're accounting for that much cap space. And you're basically in a win now mode where you are effectively at risk of losing veteran contributors that have proven to be a key cog on this team for the sake of just like, oh, let's just sit and let this guy, like, game reps are how they're going to develop. And I can understand the past references. I just think the way that the salary structure has changed, as much as I think that playing is the best thing regardless, the salary structure really makes it an egregious move to have a guy sitting for years. And the only way you can really justify that, in my opinion, is if you are a team like Green Bay, where no matter how good Jordan Love might look in practice on a given day, he doesn't look better than Aaron Rodgers. And I think that's the biggest problem, is that when Brad and I were at training camp, it was pretty much 50-50 in my book. Maybe Brad feels differently, but it felt like every other
No, it
day,
was.
Trey Lance looked better. The next day, Jimmy Garoppolo looked better. And I just think when you're at a spot where it is 50-50 like that, I would much rather take the upside with the guy who might have some growing pains, who's going to cost me significantly less money, than I would be so hellbent on keeping around this veteran quarterback who, guess what? He's also going to make mistakes rookies make too. So I think that's where it becomes more difficult, is that the guy blocking Trey Lance from playing hasn't been so much better that we can all sit here and be like, hey, it's okay, let the rookie sit. The reason why so many people want to see Trey play is because of how frustrated they've been with Jimmy. And the reason I say that is there's a lot of people I know who were very, very pro Jimmy at the start of the season, who over the course of these games are like, all right, I'm throwing in the towel. Like, I want to see Trey Lance now. Like, I've seen enough. So, again, it comes back to, none of us can say objectively that he would be better, but I just think that the 49ers need to do whatever they can to start pivoting towards, as easy transition as you can have in the offseason, giving the keys from Jimmy to Trey. Because I don't think, I'm not going to rule it out, because anything's possible. I really don't think they're winning the Super Bowl this year. I don't think anybody in the chat thinks they're winning the Super Bowl this year. If you are, kudos to you. You're a great fan. I just don't see it happening. So, it's going to be Trey Lance's show. And I just think that these reports coming out about him maybe staying, and like this thing that Peter King said about how the backup QB is super valuable and you need to respect the 2 QBs on a roster and this and that. Like, dude, I don't want to hear it. There's no justifiable outcome to paying Jimmy Garoppolo $25 million to be back on this team next year. And I just think it's better for everyone involved if he has a clean exit. They send him to a team he likes, send him to Denver or Houston or one of these teams where he's going to be comfortable. I do think that there is something to be gained from an optic standpoint, but I just think that the way that this is set up is that it's not just for this season, but the next 3 years, the 49ers have such a good chance to take advantage of having a young dynamic quarterback on a rookie deal.
Absolutely. And one last point too, kind of about our training camp conversations and that we had on this channel and other channels and Sprint Right Pod with Jason Aponte and Pasquini. They were kind of 50-50, but also in the contextual representation that they were running Jimmy's offense. They were running something where we saw for 2 days Trey Lance be far and away, at least in my opinion, far and away the better quarterback on the field, and then kind of put the clamps on him and have him operate this kind of Jimmy Garoppolo type offense, and one of the things that I had such a hard time with watching Jimmy Garoppolo play in training camp was he was playing not to make mistakes. And you could see that in training camp. And you just know, like, man, if we have that kind of mentality now in training camp when you're supposed to be letting it rip, seeing what you can get away with, seeing what you can't get away with, pushing the ball downfield. We remember he pushed it down the field maybe once a practice. And how do you get better at pushing the ball downfield if you're not practicing it, or if you're not seeing the things that you're trying to then transfer to game time situations? So it was a weird situation. It was my first camp, so I'm not going to pretend like, hey, I know how this works. I manufactured a quarterback competition that didn't exist. Um, because that's just what I felt was right. I felt that's what it should have been. It should have been an open competition. But understanding, hindsight being what it is, having all the information, understanding there are so many different variables than just football competition. And we understand in the NFL, it's money. There's a bit of politics involved. There's all different kinds of things pulling behind the scenes. So it is what it is, and it's a fun little dive, I guess, to go back in time and talk about it. We could, Jordan and I are hour 45 in example that we can just talk about this stuff for absolutely forever. Um, but trying to put a bow on it and kind of wrapping it up. Any other last takes that you have, Jordan?
Yeah, you just reminded me. I thought it was so funny. So if we go back, and again, I want to give the guy credit. Like he had days where he looked good, but the day that Jimmy Garoppolo really just was like throwing darts, taking shots downfield, like objectively, I think I even tweeted that day, like he looked like the best player on the field. Was the day that they had non-contact jerseys, no pads, no nothing, so the defense couldn't touch him. They couldn't get in his face. And it was really just kind of like glorified like walkthroughs. And he looked
Right.
like he was Joe Montana out there. Like this dude's out there throwing darts, taking shots downfield, comfortable in the pocket. But again, it was like the one day that there was absolutely no contact, no pads, no nothing. The D line couldn't get in his face. And I was just
Yeah.
like, it sounds super obvious, but it's like, oh, wow, and there's not pressure and bunch of defense playing defense. This guy actually looks really good. Like it was basically like he was quarterbacking a flag football game. He looked really well in that sense, but I just thought it was really
It's
funny.
glorified 7-on-7, basically. No,
It
no
pretty
D
much was,
no
yeah.
rush, nothing. So yeah, I'm excited to go. I'm excited to get back to training camp this year, especially you and I, Jordan, with a singular training camp under our belts. I think it was especially with the kind of interesting dynamic that it was. Again, rookie quarterback, veteran, trying to understand the lay of the land, understanding that, hey, it's not all about competition. There's other things in play. Um, so it is what it is, but I'm excited to get back. Excited for the off season. Again, it's right around the corner. And we'll be there and we'll get there and we'll dive right in when it is there. But again, we were talking about the Bengals game. Anything that last points that you wanted to wrap up heading into this game, last points for the year, for the season, anything that you got?
No, not really. I just would like to see a game where they don't beat themselves. And if Cincinnati comes out and they make some incredible plays, or Burrow hits Chase in the back of the end zone for a one-handed catch where he's tiptoeing on the pylon and they win, I'll be a little bummed. I'll be like, okay, I don't want to see another game where the 49ers go out there and they beat themselves and they lose a very winnable game because they can't get out of their own way. That's the biggest thing to me. If they
Yes.
lose because the
Yes.
other team is simply better, hey, it
Fine.
happens. That's football. But if they lose because they consistently are getting in their own way again, I will be slightly aggravated. I'm not going to let it ruin my weekend, but I will be slightly upset at it. It will irk me in the slightest.
Yeah. And I think that's fair. I think that's absolutely fair. I think if the 49ers go out there understanding where they're at a disadvantage in regards to personnel, and they put up a fight and they do what they can control what you can control. We can't always control penalties. We can't always control insane plays by the other team. But you can still control within the realm of what is in your control, your technique, your effort, those types of things, the way you see things, you can control that. So I think that's a great way to put it. If the 49ers lose to the Bengals and they play a solid game and we can walk away with our heads up high, like, man, we just got outplayed this Sunday. I think that's fine. It's if we come out another game where it's like, man, another underneath linebacker wasn't seen, or we threw into triple coverage again, or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be singular to one person. That's just going to be, I think, the most frustrating thing about it, right? So hopefully when we get through this game, again, Jordan and I will be back next week to talk about this game and again the foreseeable future for the 49ers. Hopefully we're talking about a win. Uh do you, how do you feel percentage wise? If you had to throw a percentage of like 100%, you're feeling great. I don't we don't need to do score predictions, but you're feeling great 100%. They're going to win this game. Obviously 0% not going to win this game. Where would you find yourself?
I would say 55% because I think they will win. I also try to be as objective and realistic as possible. And I think with the injuries they have in the secondary and the fact that Cincinnati is a good team and it's on the road, I think it's going to be tough. I do think the 49ers do get a slight thing in their favor that hasn't really, doesn't really get talked about much. But the fact that they are playing at 4:25 Eastern time, so it will be like a
Yes.
1 o'clock start for them. That is huge for guys whose body clocks. That 10 a.m. start kills West Coast teams. So I do think that is a
Brutal.
small thing that does kind of even out the fact they will be playing on the road in the East Coast. But I just think this is going to be a game where I think Kyle Shanahan knows he has to have it. And I think this is going to be the best game we'll see from Kyle Shanahan as a play caller this season. I think he's going to be in his bag. I think he's going to have to manufacture a lot of stuff in short yardage situations, whether it's, gimmicky stuff, whether it's screens, short yard passing, stuff like that. He's going to have to manufacture what they will be lacking from a depleted running back room. So I think he will be in his bag enough that they will pull out a win. But I also do think that Cincinnati deserves their credit. So I'm not going to sit here and just be like, oh, the 49ers, I'm not, worried about it in the slightest. But I definitely think that they will find a way to pull it out.
I like you said 55%, right? I had 60% in my mind when I asked you the question, so we're right there. I think we're pretty similar in thought process in regards. I think you laid it out perfectly. So we're not overly confident at all. Obviously, we've been watching the team for the year, so we recognize it's a bit of a mixed bag. We know that they're capable, but we also know that sometimes we don't always see what they're capable of, just based on self-inflicted wounds and errors. So hopefully, we get some clean football. That's the hope, and I do think that's a good point. The 10 a.m. start time, when you go into a different time zone, that's brutal because they're waking up at like 4 or 5 a.m. their time. It's tough on the body clock. I agree. So it is a bit of a blessing to get bumped back. So hopefully it translates into some better energy, but we're going to find out. Again, Jordan, where do they find you and read you for more content?
You can find my on Twitter. I do a lot of my stuff there. It's on the bottom of the screen. And then you can find me at Niners Nation. I do a few pieces for them every week. And yeah, that's pretty much the main two spots.
Awesome. So we'll be back next week per usual, and we'll get it all taken care of. We appreciate you, Luke. Luke said he was preoccupied, but back for the show. All good. We're just heading out, Luke, but good to get you in here right at the end. Um, Appreciate the chat as always. Appreciate everyone who's contributing. Again, we talk about when we're talking about the quarterback position, we're not always going to agree or see eye to eye, but we keep it open for discussion, and we're welcome to hear everyone and anyone's takes, who is willing to give them. So we appreciate all you guys as always contributing to the chat and the channel as always. You guys have a great Friday, great rest of your weekend. We'll see you guys on Sunday for the game. And until